We're going to continue this conversation now with a few law enforcement experts, a couple who are very familiar with what happens on city streets. I'm going to bring in Chief of Police in Miami. We're talking about Manuel Morales. He is joining us from a squad car outside a meeting. This is the only quiet conference room that he could get today. And Anthony Ambrose, a former safety director from the city of Newark. Thank you both for being here. First, as we're talking about this conversation over the last couple of days, the issues of crime and public safety continue to keep coming up. And I know that when you look at kind of the longer arc of crime statistics, for example, in New York City, crime has been up, but it's not nearly as bad as it was, say, 20 or 30 years ago. That doesn't necessarily matter to people who feel it and perceive it now. So I'm wondering, Chief Morales, I want to just come to you first. How do you deal with that kind of gap between perception and reality? Or how do you address people who are concerned about their safety and other people who might just be hearing it through kind of a political lens of everything is so much worse in Miami than it was last year or 2 years ago? Oh, Chief Morales, I think you're muted. Yeah, there you go. Nope, I still can't hear you for some reason. You know what? While you sort that out and try to get back on, Anthony Ambrose, let me come to you for a second. When you were working your way up through the beat system in Newark, as you became the public safety director, you were the chief of police before that. And at that time, it was probably the hard data showed that crime in Newark was worse than it might be today. But again, as I was asking, that if you ask the people on the streets of Newark, they might perceive themselves under greater threat today. I don't know whether that's because they see crime more on these things, whether they hear about it more often. So how do you kind of walk that fine line in helping people feel safer, but at the same time reassuring them?
Right, Harry, you're exactly right. When I became a police officer 35 years ago, even almost 36 years ago, crime in Newark was about 40,000 crime victims. Today, there's probably 6,000. So it's a much safer place, but the perception, because of social media, because of the reporting on the news outlets, on computers, there's still that aroma, that fear aroma, where even though that an individual may be a victim of a crime in your area, it's still the fear reduction still continues, that it may happen. They may be your next crime victim. So it's important that, when we talk about crime prevention and disorder, it's important to make sure that we have all the stakeholders involved. And it's important to make sure that we have the community involved. We hear community, but they have to have an active role. In Newark, New Jersey, some 2-3 years ago, we did virtual cameras where we put cameras up, and we also had people in the neighborhoods could access the cameras through their computer, and they could report and they could see what was going on. They didn't have to look out the window. They'd have to identify themselves as a victim. So they became a partner with us. And if we had to override the system because of an operation, we would do that. And we actually saw a 14% reduction in the city of Newark where the cameras were placed, the virtual cameras. So I think that transparency, making the people part of the problem, and some of them have some really great ideas. It goes back to Sir Robert Peel in the 1800s, where he said, crime and disorder is a police officer's first responsibility. But we also have to remember that police departments cannot do it alone. There's a whole criminal justice system, prosecution, judicial, parole, probation. They have to be part of it. It just can't be the people see us first, but we all have to be connected. We all have to be on the same page. And there's got to be a strategy and a tactic when we're talking about, we want to reduce fear, and we also want to prevent crime. We have to do it, look at a holistic approach, and have everyone on board with it.
Chief Morales, let me see if we can hear you now. Nope, not yet. Sorry. I'm going to continue this conversation with Anthony Ambrose until we get your microphone figured out. Thank you again for bearing with us. If you're watching, you can feel free to add a question in the comment section. Mr. Ambrose, one of the things that you talked about was adding cameras. And I know that there are a lot of police departments and cities around the country that are looking to technology to help them. What are the kinds of safeguards that you try to put into place? Because, as I'm sure you're aware, and anybody kind of in this decision-making from Nexus is aware, that the algorithm, so to speak, is only as good as how it's designed. And for example, facial recognition technology has failed in identifying people of color at greater rates versus Caucasians, right? And there have also been, concerns that people have of exactly, where does this data go? Where does it sit? What kind of imagery does the police department have access to? How do you make sure that you allay those concerns to get people in the neighborhood to be your partners and not adversarial to any technology that might be rolling out?
Well, first of all, any new technology, for instance, the cameras or license plate readers, people know they're there. They know that they're in their areas and in their neighborhoods. So we can go with the cameras. What we did was we started Community CompStat. CompStat started in New York in 1994. We adopted it in Newark in 1996. We started a Community CompStat where there was certain information that we couldn't divulge that may interrupt an investigation. But we went to the 5 sections of the city and we invited the community in to watch our commanders and watch us how we conduct business each day. And it was important that they knew that when they called the police or they saw something on their camera and they reported it, they actually heard us talking about it, how we handle it, how we logged it, how it was handled. So it gave them a better understanding. We didn't hide it. We were very transparent. And I think that's important. We also had a program making the residents ambassadors, where we made them monitor our cameras in our communication center. And it was important. We gave them
increasing transparency is a big part of it. So, if you could kind of jot down a list of things, what are the top few things that cities should do when they are trying to address public safety and to bring their communities on board in becoming partners? The transparency is a great example that you just mentioned. What else would you do? What else?
I think the transparency, and I think part of the stakeholders have to be key people in the community. I think the clergy are important. We've done that in the city of Newark. I think some of your key people in the police department have to be part of the committee. The people that maybe Chief Morales or I wouldn't see that are working midnights in a police car, but we want them to follow our lead. Have them around the table so they understand it, just not from a piece of paper. It's important to have some of your biggest critics. The other part of it is your labor unions. A lot of times chief executives don't want to deal with labor unions because of grievances, but most police officers trust their union before they trust the administration of the police department. So it's important to get them involved and let them know what we want to do so they can also be part of your cheerleading group that could actually get it done and could be a change agent for you. They could explain it to the members of their union. Now, this is what we're doing. They called me. They let me know. So that's important. So community, labor, I hate to say it, but the little person, the boots on the ground, needs to be around that table because they see things and hear things that, we're up there in that office that we don't see and hear. We hear it too late. Have them around the table, have them give some input. I think it's important. And clergy and community. The clergy and community, I've got some, in the years I spent in Newark, some of the best ideas were brainstormed through the clergy, the community, and young cops. And they actually saw, well, I went and I met with the director, I met with the chief, and they're actually going to do something that we talked about. And they buy in and they become your change agent.
Sure. All right, let me take another stab here, another swing. Chief Morales, can you hear me now? Or I should say, can I hear you?
Let's hope. Can you hear me now?
Yes, fantastic.
All right, so we adapt, overcome, and triumph, man. We don't give up. We don't give up when we don't succeed the first time, right?
That's right. So thank you for trying again. So, you've heard a little bit of the conversation. I just want to give you an opportunity to weigh in here. What are the sort of top tips that you would give to a community around the country that is trying to address some of these concerns that people have for a need for increased public safety. But at the same time, they're also a little cautious about perhaps a new technology that you might be rolling out, or how the policy is actually going to present itself to them and the members that live around them.
The best suggestion that I would have for those type of communities and the departments that are sworn to keep them safe is that trust will verify, right? You got to jump into the partnership, both feet at the same time, jump into the deep end of the pool and work together. Like Director Ambrose was saying, the only way that we're going to solve any issues that impact any of our communities, because despite our differences, we're more similar than we want to think. So we're all kind of facing the same challenges when it comes to keeping our community safe. We all want that. We all want our children in every one of our neighborhoods to be able to go outside and play safely without the fear of falling victim to gun violence. So
yeah,
on the side of the police department is by being transparent and treating the community like they demand to be treated, always with dignity, compassion, and respect.
Chief Morales, in the past couple of years, especially, there's been an increased spotlight on police departments around the country. Of course, the horrible murder of George Floyd really sparked the conversation for so many cities, and exactly how cities were funding and supporting police departments, where police departments were deploying those resources. I just want to ask, sort of, how is it going when it comes to retraining law enforcement and, building that community trust that, well, you can't function without?
So that's a phenomenal question. And one of my priorities has been that, restoring that community trust that has been eroded because of some of the incidents that you've seen at the national landscape. And even though the incidents that you're seeing might not happen in the local arena, any incident that happens in the national landscape can have a deep impact in your local department. So by going out and building that community capital, right? Having the community know who you are, having the community trust your local cops, your beat cops, and returning a little bit to the old ways, right? Where the cops know the residents, where the residents know the cops that are patrolling, that they trust them, they trust in their ability to be able to keep the community safe. That's one of the things that we have to do if we're going to move forward with a safer community, safer cities, and a safer America.
I've got a quick question. I got a quick question for both of you here. Anthony, let me start with you. I think somebody's door is open. That's right. This only happens with a police chief and a squad car. But Mr. Ambrose, Director Ambrose, I want to ask, how would you reimagine policing if you kind of had a blank canvas and you could wave a wand, so to speak? What would your ideal police department look like? And Chief Morales, I'll come to you after his question.
Well, first it starts with training, and training is continuous. And I think that the paramilitary organizations that police departments are, we're taught that from day one when you enter the academy. That's part of our survival. I think that training really has to be looked at in America, police training. I had the opportunity to go to another country, Sweden, and they spend a year in the academy, and it's mainly through looking at research and how you handle problem solving, and then maybe the last 4 weeks they do physical training and running. So it's a lot of classroom. So I think the dynamics of policing are always going to be the same to protect, serve, and prevent crime and disorder. But I think that police training has to change. We could do all the in-service, and every attorney general and prosecutor, when something happens, looks to put a fire out and change the laws or changes the guideline. I think that, we beat to whatever's happening. I think that we have to change the systemic police training. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I have to say there's got to be more role playing. There's got to be maybe the community come in for a part of it. Customer service, warrior. You're not a warrior. You're trained to be a warrior, but most of the times you're a servant. And I think that it's important that young police officers, and I'm sure the chief and myself, when we came on, we were taught that you're going to be a social worker most of your time. All right, and that is really the concept. The concept is that you're going radio assignment to radio assignment or in progress assignments. And you may only have to be a warrior out of your 4 days working. I know we worked 4 on, 2 off. Maybe you only had to be a warrior 3 times. And the rest of the times we had to give, information, and you had to be an ambassador, and kid didn't want to do his homework, or someone didn't come home from school. So I think that, when you enter the academy, they train you, and they kind of scare you, if you don't do this, you'll get killed. If you don't do that. So what happens is for 26 weeks, you're in there and you're getting hollered at, screamed at. And then when you graduate, guess who becomes the recruit? The people. The people, the instructor called you in the academy, you're calling the people that out in the street. So I think it's important that we have to go back and change police training. We are a paramilitary organization. There's no doubt about it. Okay. We have to be trained to be a warrior, but we also have to train more how to be a guardian.
Chief Morales, if you could wave that wand in the future of Miami policing, what would it look like?
So I think Derek Tombros hit it on the nail right on the head by mentioning that training needs to change. But I'll take a step prior to that. How about the way that we recruit, right? When we're going out there, we got to make sure that our departments mirror the communities we serve. So we got to have the diversity in recruitment and hiring. And for us in the Miami Police Department, we almost exactly mirror the community we serve. So we've been pretty successful when it comes to prior years and bringing on individuals into the police department that are not only from Miami, but have a vested interest in seeing our community be safer, healthier, and more vibrant.
All right, police chief from Miami, sitting in a probably hot car because he hasn't had the air conditioning on. We haven't heard it, and the door has been closed. Manuel Morales, thank you so much for joining us, along with Anthony Ambrose, a former safety director of Newark. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, that is this part of the conversation on American Cities Rebuilding. Stay tuned. Coming up next is Jeff Greenfield with Metropolis author Ben Wilson. We'll be right back.